welcome to all you wondrous beings, to the weird and the wonderful with strange bones. That's me. And what we are going to do, we are going to carry along with our standard travel around and have a look at what may or may not be found about the supernatural, the paranormal, and these wonderful things that go bump in the night. And of course, as we progress in this regard, we must find a new country and a new culture, and we are going to more or less stay in the same area of the Pacific that we have been thus far. But we are going to go to a very different country than the one we have been in before. So join me on our newest journey to discover what we may, and let us see if we can find things of interest to add to our growing knowledge of what ghosts might be, why they might be there, what to do about them, and all of the other interesting things. Welcome to Samia. So, today's little journey is going to go to Australia, and we are going to see what we can find with ghosts and cryptids and more to add to our interesting knowledge. Hey, Susan West, welcome, welcome. Now, as per the standard, we are going to just point out that you're welcome to comment as much as you like. And indeed, like, subscribe, join the channel, become a fan, and all the rest of that wonderful stuff. But remember, do please be polite. We don't expect you to agree with anything or to disagree with anything. All views are much appreciated, but politeness is required. We do not judge. But if you are rude and disruptive, alas, I will throw you off. Because after all, this is a channel for fun and information and to join. But we're not here to fight and argue. So there is where we stand. So we will accept in a little bit some lives. So shortly. Hi there to you, HTTPS Noodle. It's good to have you on board. So yeah, give me a moment to get things set up, and we will look at adding some lives if you would like to. Hey Zara, hey Petrus. So we are getting to this, but as I say, it is Australia. Now, what can we say about Australia? Well, I've always rather enjoyed Australia as a country, I've got to be honest with you, because they have a group of people that I think in many ways have much in common with South Africans, to be honest with you. So I see a lot in common there. And there are absolutely some good people. But it is also, I think, because the country, shall we say, is not terribly unlike South Africa in certain places where you've got some very, very dry and desert areas and some much more lush sort of places. So I sort of reckon I understand the environ, as it were, to a certain degree. But we have to keep in mind that they have a very unique sense of humor in Australia. And one of the things which I think shows their sense of humor is one of the most famous cryptids of Australia is, of course, the drop bear, which is entirely made up, but nevertheless a very amusing story. And from what I understand from some of my Australian friends, they've caught out a great many tourists to Australia. Of course, you must know the legend of the drop bear. It's a koala-like, thank you, a koala-like creature that sits in trees and it hunts by dropping down on its prey. And if you are not careful enough, then they will drop on your head, causing severe damage, if not death. But all of this is entirely made up, so perhaps we should keep a certain amount of open-mindedness about what we may find as the cryptids and ghost stories of Australia. Thanks for all those likes, you guys are amazing. So let's begin and see a little bit about our general landscape. So in a way, if you want to think of Australia, you need to think of it much like a ring of livable area with some very, very harsh terrain in the middle. So a lot of the lived in spaces are more coastal than anything else. We also know that it's a remarkably dangerous country just on the grounds of whatever, simply because it has so many dangerous creatures, even besides the standard, as it were. So there is no doubt in my mind that there's enough to be frightened of in Australia even before you get onto the paranormal. But let's see how it goes. So they have the standard categories of specific hauntings, particular ghosts, and a number of interesting places that are said to be haunted, which include the Monte Cristo homestead, a station in New South Wales, Port Arthur in Tasmania, and several others, including in Victoria an asylum, which should give us a reasonable collection of creatures and things that will give us fodder and possible information. Now, remember, as we start as well, we're looking for commonalities between creatures and ghosts that match things from other places around the world. See if we can say that there are any commonalities as such, if there are any particular things that might indicate that there is a certain level of truth to what is found. Hey Betswa, welcome, welcome. So we're gonna see what turns up in that regard. So the famous places, as we say, is Monte Cristo, which is a homestead, considered to be one of Australia's most haunted houses, with a history of deaths and reports of paranormal activity. Kew Station in Manly, which housed individuals with infectious diseases, and of course, many deaths occurred on the site. So, absolutely a possible place for ghosts. We have the Red Bank Tunnel in Picton, where we have an interesting one of a specific person ghost, and Emily Bollard apparently died in the tunnel, so that should be a good one. We have our usual fare of ghostly hitchhikers as well, the most famous being on the Wakehurst Parkway, which should be interesting. We have the Maitland Jail, where they say 16 men were hanged and will still haunt the grounds, which is pretty cool. And then we have Cockatoo Island, which was a convict penitentiary and reformatory, which has a couple of ghosts in. We have the Beechworth Lunatic Asylum, which definitely sounds promising there. The Princess Theatre. It's an interesting one. Again, a specific ghost of a particular person that died there. We have the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane, which, interestingly enough, has a ghost bus. Now, vehicles are not that common in hauntings, so that one promises a certain amount of interest there. So let's start ourselves off. Now, it seems that there are quite a few ghost hunting teams, paranormal investigators that have done a bit of serious examination of the ghosts and things around Australia. And in fact, there's been a few good series made. There's a chap by the name of Rob Demarest who has been checking out these sorts of places for about 20 years. So that promises at least some on-site type info, as it were. In one of their stories, they talk about the Woodford Academy for Boys in the Blue Mountains, which is said to be haunted by the White Lady, believed to be a convict's wife who was hanged or possibly murdered by her husband in the back garden. It was also haunted by a mentally ill girl named Jessie, who was locked up in the attic by her father, the Academy's founder. Now, that's only 2 of the 12 ghosts that are supposed to be there, and which the staff that still look after the place refer to as the Dismal Dozen. That sounds pretty cool, actually. So we like the idea of that. We have the old Geelong jail, where quite a few executions took place there, but it was a particularly violent jail, and there were 500 confirmed deaths of inmates caused by inmate attacks using varying homemade weaponry. And there was a particularly violent former prisoner by the name of Percy Ramage, who was apparently a huge man. And in death, his 7-foot tall ghost still haunts his cell. I rather like the idea of that indeed. So imagine a 7-foot tall ghost lurching out of a cell at you. I think I'd enjoy that. Welcome, welcome to all of you guys who've just joined in. Another rather interesting one which turned up, which is actually kind of scary in a way, is the Arradale Mental Hospital, where it's reported that over 10,000 patients died. It's got 70 buildings in its properties, and the epicenter of the paranormal activity is in the men's wing, which can only be accessed by a covered bridge, which they charmingly call the Suicide Walk. And this is where the absolute worst patients were kept. and one of the ghosts in there is actually a nurse that still remains to this day. I do enjoy the idea of that. Um, as an as a psychiatric hospital, of course, back in the day when people were less uh, subtle, shall we say, um, it was just called a lunatic asylum, and it's linked to two others, one at Kew and one at Beechworth, that were commissioned to accommodate the difficult clientele, as it were. There is, of course, also the Gledwoods Homestead, which I think is quite interestingly uh, because there were a number of deaths, including that of the entire one family, and scarlet fever caused the deaths, and the little girl, as you know, I've said before, children ghosts are definitely not ones I ever enjoy, but um, she died of scarlet fever and she still wanders the halls, but she is wandering them not alone, because she is with her father who built the main house. And apparently, there is even another specific ghost there, the groundskeeper, John Biggs, who was instantly killed by a falling tree on the property, which is interesting because accidental deaths in general do not engender a ghost. Usually, there requires to be some deep emotional reason. So, who knows? Perhaps there was something more to that. Um, One which definitely I think is interesting is the Adelaide Arcade, where a local woman by the name of Florence Horton was shot and killed by her jealous husband. Um, what's very interesting is it's a very fancy and upmarket type arcade in Adelaide, and nevertheless, it's not only got Florence Horton wandering there. There's also a chap by the name of Francis Clooney, a former security guard, who died when he fell into the mall's turbine engine. That sounds a suitably awful death, absolutely, and in every possible way. So yeah, that one I think is suitably dark. I remember being minced up as your mode of death. Um, it's not the only haunted arcade in Australia, though. Um, in fact, there's one right next door where a little boy called Sydney Byron, or Brian, was murdered when his mother smothered him to death. It must have been a fairly awful situation indeed. Um, but looking at the Monte Cristo homestead, um, this particular one is a country estate and quite a pretty sort of a place in many ways. Um, and the murder there is in fact unsolved to this day. Apparently, there was quite a tragic backstory to it as well. You can still, however, stay there, in fact, and have yourself a three-course dinner and a ghost tour, and possibly meet one of these hauntings that are lurking in there. But let's just see if I can pop up my notes on it. There we go. Um, there's an interesting story to it. So the homestead is apparently in a little town in New South Wales called Junee. And it's a lovely place to visit, but within this particular place, of course, is the Monte Cristo mansion, which is a Victorian mansion that gained fame as one of those very, very haunted places. It was built in 1885 by Christopher William Crawley, a wealthy landlord. And obviously, as old as it is, there's been all sorts of events that have occurred within um, the mansion. And it was a family residence for a very long time. But what can we expect if we were to go there? Well, they say that visitors to the place report many sightings of figures. Um, there are also flickering lights, a number of temperature drops, and unexplained noises. Now, again, and I'm putting it out to you guys, if you have a comment, give it, please. Why do ghosts make the temperature drop? We know that they do. That absolutely is the case. So, no doubt about that. But why would that be? And the affecting electricity, I always find interesting. What would cause that, I wonder. But nevertheless, you can go and visit it now. Now, what is the reason? Visitors and staff report lots of stuff happening there, all the things as mentioned, and they say that the homestead seems to have a life of its own, and inexplicable shadows move across the walls. Um, one of the most famous stories revolves around the tragic death of a maid that fell from the balcony, and they say that she still wanders up and down um, the halls there, and more than one person has said they feel an icy presence uh, on the spot where she met her untimely end. I think that would absolutely be a decent choice of place to visit if we were able to do so. I have not, alas, been to um, Australia myself. I do, believe it or not, have family there. So that would be good. Nevertheless, we also have an interesting place in Wilberforce in New South Wales, which is the Australia Pioneer Village. Um, it is, in fact, a village that was opened as a um, tourist attraction in the 1960s. But what they did, they built it using buildings that were moved there from their original locations in the they were built in the 1800s. Now, this fits in with other haunted places that we have encountered, which I think is very interesting indeed, because as we saw in a number of places like Kenya, I believe we did as well in North America and in South America, that it seems that items can become haunted. And by moving these buildings to make this pioneer village, they brought the ghosts along with it. And these creepy cottages um, have current residents, so to speak. There's even a schoolhouse named after Samuel Marsden, who um, was an English born priest of the Church of England in Australia and a prominent member of the Missionary Society. Apparently, he was quite an important figure, but the church that bears his name um, is apparently filled with an awful and malevolent energy. There's a barber shop there with a top floor that used to be a brothel where ghostly ladies of the night have been witnessed by a number of different people. So it seems by bringing all of these old buildings together, um, they did something that perhaps was less than wise. All they've done is concentrated the ghosts. The Norse Caputa Hotel in the Barossa region was used during the copper rush days um, as a hotel and a brothel for Cornish miners, and it's said to have the most haunted pub. And you know I'm going to do it, and I cannot stop myself, but it seems that the pub is full of spirits. Sorry. Um, they say that the ghosts there um, are quite malevolent and can cause you to even feel quite sick. There is a creature of some kind which is referred to as the man in black, which is said to be quite a creepy one, and he is said to have killed a lady in there. Hey there, pretty girl, welcome, welcome. So we definitely have, and of course, the one which I was quite keen to check out is Cockatoo Island. Now, Cockatoo Island is a small island in Sydney Harbour.
Cockatoo Island is a small island. Cockatoo Island is a small island.
Hey there, pretty girl, you with us?
Everyone has tried Pepe.
Welcome, welcome.
Are you okay?
So, it's described as the Australian version of Alcatraz, and it was used as a convict penitentiary in the 1800s. Um, the most haunted site on the premises is Belula House, a former girls' reformatory that's now the home of the angry spirit, the Red Lady. They believe it was Marianne Lucas, who in life was often seen arguing with her husband, the school superintendent. Um, so they have that, and they also have a guard that was killed by prisoners that fell asleep on post. So yeah, that's a number of good possible hauntings right off. Um, Picton in New South Wales is said to be one of the most haunted towns in Australia. It's got lovely country gardens and all the rest of it, but about 60 minutes or 60 kilometers, sorry, southwest of Sydney, and very significant historically due to its buildings and railway tunnels um, that make it quite important. And there are quite famous stories of ghosts that drift around the tunnels, and stories are linked to a terrible railway accident involving a woman named Emily Bollard. The report suggests that people often witness Emily and two other women and hear some scary voices, crying, and shrieks. They report that there are sudden drops of temperature, eerie shadows, gusts of winds, orbs, body chills, and many other weird happenings inside the tunnels. And of course, that fits very much to what we have seen in other places that are caused by ghosts. So certainly shadows, temperature drops, orbs. Another thing I would like a proper reason for why would there be orbs. We know that they do turn up in many reports on haunted sites, just like chills and such. But why? Now it's interesting to note that um, many of the stories. Stop doing that. Involves similar things, but nobody seems to be able to explain to us why that happens. I'd love to hear some comments as to what you might think causes these things. Hey there, it's the Russian organization, and to evolve. Welcome, welcome. If you would like to join in live, do let me know. That would be awesome. Now, the next interesting spot that we want to have a chat about is the Arradale Lunatic Asylum. Now, we know absolutely and without a doubt, lunatic asylums are hotbeds of hauntings and such. And this one was built in 1860. The institution is located around 200 kilometers west of Melbourne. And it's a government institution that was used to house the lunatics of Victoria. It has a 130-year history, and they say that around 13,000 patients in its history have died on the property, which certainly gives you a sufficiency of fodder for ghosts. People say that one of the most famous ones there is a ghost called Old Margaret, who was a resident of said lunatic asylum. And people say that they see her wandering up and down the halls of the now defunct asylum. There are also weird claims there, and this is where our ranking of ghosts becomes important, because as we said there, you get those ghosts that are mere echoes. You get those ghosts that you can possibly see and hear but not interact with. You get the ghosts that you can interact with, and you get the more violent ones that actually want to interact with you. And they say that if you are walking through the place, you can be touched by cold hands, especially going through the men's surgery wing of the asylum. The cold winds is an interesting one. You don't always get cold winds along with ghosts, but some places you do. You hear the screaming of people here. And yeah, I think that would definitely give it a suitable count for properly haunted in that regard. So yeah. Now, Port Arthur in Tassie. Port Arthur was built in the 1830s as a timber station and is a World Heritage Site, and obviously has a very long history. It was originally a convict colony used to hold the most hardened of criminals, and the convicts lived under unbearable conditions and were forced to do very hard manual labor. Many died under the horrifying circumstances, and of course, this is absolutely a good example of what might cause a ghost, because as we know, you need to have a strong emotional imprint, both at the dying of the person and on the part of the person. So having that is kind of rare, and maybe that's why not everybody ends up a ghost. But for those who lived and worked under these conditions, it would engender enough anger and horror to cause a ghost. There was also a huge massacre that occurred there in 1996. A gunman named Martin Bryant killed 35 people and wounded 23 others. According to reports, this was one of the worst mass shootings in the history of Australia. And they say that this may have left behind a number of ghosts. Inside the house of one of the residents there, a Reverend George Eastman, people witnessed several spirits, had doors slam and heard footsteps, and the lights turned on and off, and in some cases lights appeared where there were no lights to be had. So that absolutely seems to be a very good example of haunting. And again, why the electricity being affected? Why lights? Why orbs? What is it that ghosts are trying to do? It seems to be difficult to answer, but with all of that tragedy, we can see why they turned up. So absolutely. What's the topic, Antonio? The topic is the paranormal and supernatural. We go around the world and look at different cultures and different countries and see if we can find commonalities. And today we are doing Australia. So welcome to you all. Welcome, Kitty. And Berkele Jorgensen, welcome to you too. Now, the next place to look at is the Fremantle Arts Centre, which was opened in 1964, and it was originally known as the Fremantle Lunatic Asylum. So it might be an art centre now, but it certainly wasn't before. It was made to hide away the worst and meanest criminals of Western Australia, as well as, because why not, people who suffered from alcoholism, drug addiction, and social issues, as well as sunstroke. So they were considered to be criminally insane, and they were forced to live in pathetic conditions, which sounds absolutely delightful, you know. Murdered 15 people, off you go. Got sunstroke, off you go. Why not? That seems absolutely acceptable, doesn't it? Dearie, the way people have been in the past has been fantastically. One such person that they talk about, there was a woman that lived there, Martha Rendell, whose red-headed daughter was abducted, and as a result of it, she went insane and then was housed at the lunatic asylum. People claim to have seen her ghosts, and most importantly, she seems to tease and mess around with anybody that are also redheads. So if you're a redhead and you go there, she may pull your hair or poke you. There are reports that states it was so bad in the place that up to 20 people were forced to sleep in one room. And there was a murder of one of the residents at the hands of a very violent patient in the 1900s. So absolutely a prime spot for suitable craziness, both living and dead, it seems. Hey, Riri, welcome back. And to the little lion. Good to see you guys here. So yes, Australia. The Princess Theatre in Melbourne, which is quite interesting. In the 1880s, a local opera singer by the name of Fred Baker was seeing that he was failing somewhat and decided to zhuzh himself up a bit. So he called himself Federici and pretended to be a European singer. This caused a lot of the affluent populace to come to hear this exotic singer And in March of 1888, he was completing a show at the Princess Theatre, and he hit a high note as he was descending onto the stage, and as he did so, he had a heart attack and died on the spot. His death was witnessed by a stagehand, but the interesting thing is he hadn't got onto the stage when he dropped dead. So while the stagehand was dealing with the body, the other actors on the stage carried on, and afterwards they swore that Federici had been on stage with them right up to the final curtain. And they say that his ghost is still there. Talk about dedication to your art. So absolutely, a couple of goodies right there. Checking around on specific ghosts, the Arradale Mental Asylum has, as I briefly said, had a particular nurse, Kerry, who is believed to specifically be in the women's wards, and she was known to wear heeled shoes. They don't say if they were flat heels or high heels, so I can't give you fashion tips, but they used to make a specific clicking as she walked up and down in the wards, and even today you can absolutely hear this clicking up and down. But she's not alone in there, and a number of people have said maybe it's her, but maybe it's others from the asylum, because it was, of course, a lunatic asylum. They claim that they have been pushed, scratched, and bitten. So violent and upset ghosts right there. That's a definite, if you're in Australia, definitely give that one a good check out, because you're almost certainly going to find something good. So absolutely, absolutely. And remember, as we go along, do like, subscribe, join the channels, be part of our live events, and do give many, 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 many comments, because comments are needed to be able to keep things going and make this fun. As we are running down, we are going to Victoria, and therein we find the Young and Jackson Hotel. Now, this hotel started trading in the 1800s, but apparently it still is working today. So a great history, but a current hotel. But it does have its residents' ghosts, and lots of visitors there say that they have seen the apparition of a woman standing against a light post which is outside the hotel. At first, she appears to be a very, very beautiful woman, but as you approach, you realize that her throat has been slashed from ear to ear, and nobody knows who she is or why she is there. But for whatever reason, she stays outside the hotel and is very, very dead. Now, as we go along, one of the things that has been a requirement in entering a country for quite a long time, as we know, is quarantine. And if you are suspected, and even today, if you are suspected of having some kind of sickness, you can be put into quarantine. However, in the past, this is probably something that was far less comfortable than today. So on the North Head, there's the quarantine station for Sydney, and it was used to isolate, as I've said, those suspected of carrying contagious diseases. And apparently, thousands died here under the grim conditions while they awaited the possibility of being allowed out. And I should imagine, given that in the past many unsanitary uh, situations were the norm, if you didn't have something going in, you certainly did when you got there. And they say that many restless spirits are said to still wander the old grounds there. Visitors have reported seeing shadow figures, apparitions, hearing strange noises, and feeling again sudden drops in temperature. Some claim to have been touched or even pushed. Now, I find this very interesting because once again we have the issue of shadow people, and we will definitely come back to that at the end to add to our collection of stories. But in the meanwhile, quick poll for all of you great peoples out there. Please do give me some opinions, if you will, um, which is right along the line of um, still why lights, why affect electricity, why cold spots. Um, we still want reasons for these things to occur, and I have not yet found anyone that can give me a decent set of answers in that regard. So do that if you can. And remember, like and subscribe and share and all the rest of those fun things as we next go to Kapunda, which is an hour out of Adelaide. And again, it is a town. And apparently, the town itself is pretty spooky, but in the center of the town is the North Kapunda Hotel. Um, why they say it's in the center when it's North Kapunda, I don't know. Maybe it's in the northern part of the town, but near to the middle. Who's to say? But it's a hotel. Apparently, this is the scariest place in town. The building boasts a number of ghosts, and they include such as the spirit of two little girls and a malevolent entity in black. Some spirits on the property are more, excuse me, more benign, but certainly you don't want to meet the entity in black. One of the girls, mostly, however, hides in an upstairs area of the hotel to avoid the man in black, which then leads us to another question. And this adds to our ghostly collection of stories to say that can ghosts be harmed? Are ghosts afraid of other ghosts? Is there more to this? Which is very interesting. And there is a gentleman that used to live there, and this is actually apparently very genuine. Um, his name was Dr. Blood, and that was really his name. But apparently, true to his name, he performed experiments on people. And some people have said that he is one of those ghosts that are there, and which is also quite malevolent and who you might want to avoid. Now, the man in black, all that they really say about him, that they don't know who he is or where he came from, but he's regularly seen. He always is dressed entirely in black and with a wide brimmed hat, which gives really interesting Slender Man vibes right there. So, absolutely. Uh, but he is apparently a true misogynist, and he will attack female visitors to the hotel and spends a lot of time terrifying the female ghosts. So that's an interesting setup right there that I don't think we've encountered very much before, to say that um, ghosts attack other ghosts. It's a very interesting thought in that regard. But as we move along, we're going to have to talk about a little bit of history and, of course, the old Melbourne jail in Victoria. And it's held a number of quite famous or infamous criminals and dangerous ones, which includes, of course, the amazing Ned Kelly. And there are a great number of even songs and things that refer back to Ned Kelly. And I do believe that Waltzing Matilda is actually about Ned Kelly, from what I've heard. If you're Australian, let me know if that's true, but I do believe that is the case. And of course, Ned Kelly um, was quite a character, and his story is well worth um, following up on. But his death mask is on display at the jail. Now, there's a particular cell that has a reputation for violence, the cell number 17, and no one knows which ghost inhabits the cell, but if you go in it, you will be scratched, bitten, or bruised in some way by whatever is lurking in this room. And they say it's happened on such uh, frequent occasions that nowadays, unless you sign a waiver, they won't let you go into the cell, because it's just that common that people will get harmed by whatever is inside. Cheers to you all. Now, another interesting one, and I'm going to claim that this might be the most boring ghost ever. Brisbane City Hall in Queensland. Municipal ghosts, perhaps? Well, yes. There is the ghost of a maintenance worker who died in the 1930s in an accident while the building was being constructed, and many report seeing his figure standing in the clock tower or hearing him walk around. And sometimes the clock hands move even though the clock is no longer working, and it seems that this old worker is still wandering around and doing his job in the city hall, and he's quite a harmless chap. But maybe somebody should go and tell him it's quite time to knock off. But nevertheless, an interesting story. Now, another mental asylum. It seems that there are a number in Australia that are quite famous. The Larendel Mental Asylum, which has something of a dark history, had a particular young girl who was quite insane, and apparently the only thing she owned was a music box, and she was obsessed by it. She would play it over and over and over, and it is said that now, obviously, her ghost haunts the place, and you can still hear the sound of her music box echoing through the derelict halls, which I think is suitably chilling. We do enjoy a good haunting, do we not? The next one we're going to touch on is a maritime ghost or haunting, and we're going to start with a ship called the Alkimos. Now, this ship was a problem from the beginning. It was built during World War II. It had a history of many strange accidents and deaths even before it was abandoned, and now it is wrecked off the coast of Western Australia. The wreckage there has engendered reports of strange lights, ghostly figures, and unexplained noises. Some fishermen say that they've seen a phantom crew walking the deck at night. So it seems that with a sufficiency of deaths on board, it still is in action and going. Maybe one day it will simply up and sail away. I think that would be a particularly creepy and fun situation. Now, along with all of that, let us go on and see what else we can find. We have the Richmond Bridge. Now, here's another thing that we can add to our ghostly knowledge, so to speak, and that is the concept of liminal spaces. And as we well know, liminal spaces are those places where you have a crossover between places, and it is said in quite a lot of different cultures and countries that liminal spaces are known as places where you will get a particular thinning of the veil, as they like to call it, where either ghosts can appear or other supernatural creatures. So, thresholds of any kind, crossroads, places like that, and of course, bridges. And the Richmond Bridge in Tasmania is the oldest bridge in Australia, but it is also the most haunted bridge. It is said that a spirit named George Grover lives on the bridge after being murdered while overseeing repairs. Some claim to see Grover stalking them, and many experience an overwhelming sense of aggression that is generated by the spirit, even though there would be no reason for them to experience that kind of feeling. So, an interesting set of stories right there. And speaking of bridges and roads and stuff, let's have a look at some haunted roads on the Nullarbor Plain. There is a large highway that goes straight through, and according to stories, there are quite a few ghosts that might be encountered on the highway by drivers. Mysterious lights, ghostly figures, even hearing voices when nobody else is around. But as we know, the Nullarbor Desert is, or the Nullarbor Plain, it's a huge and empty place. So perhaps it is that it is haunted, or perhaps it is so empty that we create ideas in our head just to give us something to break the monotony. Um, but they do say that it's a sort of place that driving at night is quite spine chilling. But of course, because of the length of it, driving at night often happens. So, well, there you go. Then we have the Wakehurst Parkway, which is said to be the most haunted road in Sydney. It's in the northern suburbs of Sydney. It's famous for its ghostly hitchhikers. A number of drivers have reported picking up passengers that disappeared partway through the drive. They say that if you play loud music uh, while driving down the road, it can cause your car to malfunction or stop entirely, and it seems that certain ghost, or maybe a ghost on the road, doesn't like noise. So if you actually go out there and do something like that, there is a reasonable chance that the ghosts will stop your 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 car. I think that's actually rather brilliant. I like the idea of them being able to do that. Hey, Melissa. Hey, David Plummer. Now, the next interesting one. How many of you are Stephen King fans? If you have ever read the absolutely famous Christine, you know all about cursed cars. So there is the ghost car of Woomera. Now, Woomera is a small town in South Australia. It's had a reputation for strange occurrences, and one of the most famous stories is a ghost car that locals will tell you of, and it's been spotted driving along the roads late at night, causing accidents before disappearing without a trace. Despite investigations, nobody has been able to explain where the car comes from or why it suddenly vanishes after causing the chaos. But it's become something of a local legend, and many drivers are actually now afraid to drive at night through Woomera because of this car. There is no backstory to it, and nobody seems to know why this car turned up, but nevertheless, it did. The next interesting one is the Death Car of Sydney, an urban legend about a car that seems to bring tragedy to anyone who owns it. Now, absolutely, we've encountered a number of these, and I believe we spoke in one of our past lives about. I've just realized how ironic it is. We spoke in our past lives um, about the car that was owned by James Dean, which apparently, if you own it or drive it, you will have a terrible accident and die. So this is just like that. The car has been passed from owner to owner, and each new driver has reported accidents and mechanical failures. The original owner is said to have died in a car accident, and they say that his spirit still haunts the vehicle, leading to its mishaps and so on. Whether or not the car is truly cursed or is just very, very unlucky, it might be a good car not to buy. Now, another interesting one is whereby people had interesting sudden breakdowns that particularly occurred on Friday the 13th. Now, is there really something to the idea of Friday the 13th, or is this just one of those urban legends where people think something's going to happen and therefore ascribe the supernatural to it? Most people will tell you that it's just in the mind, but mechanics have mentioned they do see more customers on Friday the 13th, and perhaps there is some kind of supernatural reason behind it. But that, alas, is a bit difficult to answer. Moving on with our ghostly hitchhikers, there's a number of them apparently in Queensland, where one of the most famous stories involves a man driving late at night when he saw a woman standing by the side of the road. He offered her a ride, but after a few minutes, he glanced over to check she was okay because she had gone quiet and found that she had vanished. The ghostly passengers seem to appear most frequent. Bleh, can you speak? I can't. Appear most frequently on rural roads, and generally the drivers are on their own. Does that have anything to do with it? I don't know. The next interesting one is the Bega crash mystery. In Bega, New South Wales, a driver reported being run off the road by another car, only for the police to investigate and find no trace of any other vehicle. The driver was adamant that they had seen a car approach them head on, but when authorities arrived at the scene, there were no skid marks or debris or anything that showed another vehicle had been there. The unsolved mystery left locals wondering if perhaps the car that drove at this poor fellow was in fact a ghost. So, what can we say? Well, if you're in one of these areas, keep your car maintained. Stay alert, make sure that you are well rested, and don't pick up strangers, just in case that stranger is stranger than you think. So, absolutely very, very, very interesting. I was not able, alas, to find too much in the way of personal stories about experiences per se, but I did get a couple of comments from people about some of the places that we have mentioned. So one person said that they went ghost hunting to the Adelaide lunatic asylum, where they say they actually did work for a time. And they say that both their friend and themselves did see apparitions. So there was that comment. In terms of Monte Cristo in Geneva, a guy says his cousin went and they actually caught pictures of some of the ghosts clear as day. So maybe. All things are possible. Now, we're going to go on to the most famous ghost in Australia, they say, which is supposed to be very popular all over Australia as well. Pretty Girl and Blythe, hello to you both. The topic is the paranormal and the supernatural, but we're going around the world looking at different cultures and countries so we can specifically see if there are any commonalities and such, just to add to our interest and our knowledge of these things and decide for ourselves whether or not we think it is real or if it is all just in people's heads, who knows. So yes. So the most famous of these stories in Australia is Fisher's Ghost, and it dates to the early 19th century, and it arose from a number of historical events which occurred in Campbelltown in New South Wales, which now, of course, is quite a large outskirt, do you call it? Suburb? Yes, suburb would do, of Sydney, and is full of lots and lots of people. But at the time, it was a very remote rural place. Now, according to the legend, on the 17th of June in 1826, an English-born Australian farmer from the Campbelltown area named Frederick Fisher, who actually was born in London, suddenly disappeared. Now, his friend and neighbour George Worrell claimed that Fisher had returned to England and that before departing had given him power of attorney over his property and general affairs. And so thereafter, in fact, claimed that Fisher had written to him and said, look, I'm not coming back to Australia, so you can have the farm. Now, I'm going to put it to you that right there, if that's not suitably suspicious, I don't know what is. No, he left. He gave me everything. So as the story as the story goes on, 4 months later, a respectable local man named John Farley ran into the local hotel in a very agitated state. He's told the astonished patrons that he had just seen Fred Fisher sitting on the rail of a nearby bridge, but was very, very clearly a ghost. He said that the ghost had said nothing, but merely pointed to a paddock beyond the creek before disappearing. Now, Farley was laughed off initially, but the circumstances eventually aroused sufficient suspicion that a police search thought to themselves, you know what, maybe we should just check out this paddock. And they went and dug it up and discovered the remains of a murdered Fisher buried by the side of the creek. George Worrell, the guy who said, no, it was my friend, he gave me everything, was actually arrested for the crime, confessed the murder, and was subsequently hanged. So it turned out that Fred Fisher had land he wanted. But Fred was buried in the cemetery at St. Peter's Anglican Church, and we wonder what actually really went on. Now, the story has gained popularity and has been fictionalized and all the rest of it, as you would expect. But the original story, the murder really did occur. Contemporary police and court records don't mention the ghost story, but they do actually say that his body was found along what is now known as Fisher's Ghost Creek, though possibly in a way that shows that sometimes there is absolutely no romance in modern world. They have converted the creek into a stormwater drain. Nevertheless, there is a festival surrounding it, which goes back to 1956, that is organized by the Campbelltown City Council, and it uses the legend of Fisher's ghost to promote community togetherness and so on and so forth. So apparently some good at least has come out of the poor lad's death. More can we say about this? Probably not. But nevertheless, that's our ghosts for now. What we are now going to do is jump across to the other part of the topic, which is, of course, the cryptids, and see what we can find. Now, if you're newly on, I'm going to remind you that you are absolutely welcome to comment, and we love all comments, whether you agree or disagree. All we ask is that you be polite, because we don't want rudeness, and have as much fun as possible with this, but maybe we'll learn something as well. You never know. We will do a wrap up at the end with what we've got out of our studies around the world so far, and that might be fun too. But now we're going to jump across from the ghosts to the cryptids. And is there really anything out there that we can talk about? Now, Australia, of course, has quite a collection. And as you might not know, in the modern age, we tend to refer to cryptids as something that's only supernatural, but that is not the case at all. Cryptids also refer to creatures which could be real, but which people say absolutely don't exist or possibly are extinct. And one of my favorite examples of that, of course, is the coelacanths, which was found happily swimming despite being a cryptid off the coast of South Africa. But of course, there's been a number in Australia as well. I think one of them is called a red dingo, which everyone said doesn't exist, but actually does. So there are a few possible things that are or are not cryptids, but some of them are indeed quite supernatural. So we're going to start now looking through a couple of those. But remember, like, subscribe, join our channel, send lots of gifts and things to boost it. Join our fan club. You're all welcome, and we enjoy having you with us. So as we go on, the first, of course, is an important cryptid because going around the world, we've discovered quite a lot of places that have a creature that we are going to term, for want of a better description, as a Bigfoot. We have the Yeti in Tibet and in other parts of Russia as well. We've got the Bigfoot in Canada and North America. We have smaller versions of a Bigfoot-like creature in several countries around Africa as well. We have Bigfoot-like creatures in South America. So it seems that it's a very popular cryptid in one manner or another. And yes, in Australia, you get the Yowie, which is basically a Bigfoot. You also get the Bunyip, which is particular an Australian cryptid, but maybe we can know something about. We have the infamous drop bear, which of course is completely a prank, but nevertheless is amusing. There is also the Yaramayahu and the Hawkesbury River Monster and the Burrinjaw. So let's go through a few of these and see what they can tell us. So the first one we're going to touch on is the Bunyip. Now, this is probably the most famous of the Australian cryptids. It's a creature that comes from Aboriginal mythology. It's said to lurk in swamps, billabongs, creeks, riverbeds, and waterholes. Now, the name seems to come from the Wemba Wemba or the Wagaya language of the Aboriginals from Victoria in southeastern Australia. In a way, it is just a word that if you translate, it kind of means evil spirit. So whether originally it was one thing or not is not entirely sure, and why it originally became a thing is also not entirely certain, but they say it more or less is a large black animal not unlike a seal with a peculiar and terrible voice that causes much terror. It's got a couple of different names depending on which tribe is talking about it, but by and large, there you go. The main features of it are that it is amphibious, almost entirely aquatic, inhabiting, as we say, all of these places of water. There was a chap that tried to get it properly described, a man by the name of George French Angus, but it seems that the actual physical descriptions vary very strongly, making it almost impossible. It could be either an enormous starfish-like creature, There is a couple of places where a bunyip was being carved into artwork in rocks and such, that make it more seal-like. They say that one version is that it was quite huge, maybe being 11 paces long and 4 paces wide. But nobody seems to really agree, except that it is something that may have a nocturnal side to it as well as aquatic. They are supposedly seen by people. About 60% of sightings resemble seals or dog-like creature, and about 20% are more long-necked, possibly like Loch Ness Monster. The seal dog variety is described as being only 4 to 6 feet long, with shaggy black or brown fur. They have round heads, much like a bulldog, prominent ears, no tail, and whiskers like a seal or otter. The long-necked variety is between 5 and 15 feet long, also furred, black or brown, with large ears, small tusks, and a head more like a horse or possibly an emu, but its elongated neck is maned, and it has a horse-like tail. Now, more than that we can't say. It generally feeds on crayfish and other fish, but when it can, it is a bloodthirsty predator of humans, especially ones that are weaker, like women and children. And apparently, the Aborigines purposely avoided certain bodies of water because they said that were where the bunyips can be found. Now, it is mentioned as being part of even the dreamland or the dream time, which, as we know, is part of Aboriginal traditional mythology. So it goes back a very, very long way, and you start to wonder if maybe this was one of those prehistoric animals that people remembered stories of. But nevertheless, it holds a place in Australian mythology and stories, and sightings have occurred even up till today. There were a number of bunyip sightings, even by Europeans, in the 1840s and 1850s, especially around Victoria. After that, there were more apparent sightings around the 1850s, and they say that they actually found a bunyip skull, which was put in a museum, but later on it was claimed that the skull that is there is the deformed fetal skull of a calf. So maybe not. How would you know? Well, I suppose they'd have to test it. Other people say that a bunyip might well be a giant platypus. So, who's to say? After the 1850s, there have been a number of people who claim to have seen possible sightings of a bunyip, but none have really been properly established as fact. But because it's so big in Australian stories, it's had plenty of movies made about it and books and poetry and all the rest of that. So it's gained its fame, nevertheless. So it's done something good for itself, perhaps. I don't know what more we can say about it, though, except if you're in Australia, see if you can actually see one. The next interesting cryptid, which again is particular to Australia, is in fact a vampiric type monster. And perhaps this is their version of a vampire, and that is the Yaramayahu. What exactly is that? Well, let's go through it. It comes out of, again, southeastern Australian Aboriginal mythology, um, and it is a little red frog-like man with a big head, a large mouth with no teeth, and suckers on the end of its hand and feet. And it lives in trees, specifically fig trees. And instead of hunting for food, it will wait for unsuspecting travelers to rest and fall asleep under the tree, then drop down and use its suckers in its hands and feet to drain the victim's blood. It will particularly do a strange thing after draining the blood. It will swallow the victim, and after it has done so, it will drink water and then sleep. When it awakens, it regurgitates the victim, leaving them shorter than before and with a slightly reddish tint to their skin. If this process happens again, the victim may become a Yaramayahu. It's said that they are only active in the day and only targets living prey. So, what can we say? It's very unique just to Australia, and it's sufficiently weird that perhaps we can cheerfully say that no, maybe not, but I don't know. The next interesting one is, I don't know if it counts as a cryptid, but it's what they call the Min Min light. Now, there are stories about the lights found in several Aboriginal Australian cultures predating European colonization of Australia, and they are part of a very bizarre kind of Australian folklore because many of the indigenous Australians say that the number of sightings increased once Europeans came into the outback. The first recorded sighting was as far back as 1838, which is quite interesting. Now, why are the lights called the Min Min lights? We don't know. It could come from an Aboriginal language, or it could be because at the site there is a hotel called the Min Min Hotel at the settlement called Min Min, where the light was observed by a stockman in 1918. There is no real connection. I don't suppose it really matters. But they are characterized as benign, but a little shocking if you're not expecting them. They've been seen throughout Australia from as far south as Brewarrina in western New South Wales and as far north as Boulia in Queensland. The majority of sightings, though, occur in Channel Country. Sometimes, though, they are also seen in Yunta, South Australia, where it's noted that, like Channel County, it has some very extreme heat. So maybe that has something to do it. Basically, what you can expect in terms of this cryptid is a fuzzy disc-shaped light that appear to hover just above the horizon. They are depicted generally as being white, but sometimes may change color to red or green, and back again. They sometimes are quite dim, but occasionally are quite bright, and can even illuminate the ground underneath them, causing them to cause quite clearly defined shadows. According to folklore, they sometimes follow or approach people, but will disappear when fired upon. So would I, to be fair. But may come back. Anyone that chases the lights and catches them, it is said, will never be seen again. But how true that is not confirmed. Some witnesses describe the light as appearing to come nearer and nearer and nearer and then retreat and then come nearer again. Some have said that the lights keep pace with them if they were in a moving motor vehicle. There is no certainty as to what they are. People have offered a whole lot of stories as to what they might be, from bioluminescence to geophysical lights like marsh gas and such, but that doesn't seem to really answer anything properly. So, yep, we've got some strange lights, which may or may not be of importance. Now, the next fellow we're going to touch on, of course, is our Bigfoot, the Yowie. And it's one of several names that people have given to this creature, which may or may not be good or of importance to whether or not we need worry trying to name it. But basically, and in short, it is described as a bipedal, hairy, somewhat ape-like creature standing between 6 and 12 feet. Reports of Yowie footprints describe them as being significantly larger than a human's, but apparently the tracks are generally inconsistent in exact shape or toe number. The Yowie's nose is described as wide and flat, and their behavior can vary from the timid and reclusive to the violent or aggressive. Where exactly the name comes from is not clear. There's a number of stories about that. But as with anything, who's to say? It was recorded as being seen as far back as the early 19th century, and it's possible, but not as easy to confirm, that as far back as 1795, this creature was apparently seen and thought to be a kind of indigenous ape. But while lots of people claim to have seen it, finding physical evidence thereof, it seems, is quite hard. Could it be an indigenous ape? It's absolutely possible. One description was that the creature is tall and tailless, covered in black hair with reddish fur around the throat and chest. When standing upright, it has 6 feet of height, small, restless eyes that are partly obscured by matted hair. Apparently, the guy that described it in this particular story, he threw a rock at it and it ran away. Well, to be fair, I'd run away if he threw a rock at me. But right up until today, there's plenty of people that claim to have seen the Yowie, and there are even people who are professional Yowie investigators. There's a chap by the name of Andrew McGinn, and he says that he uncovered a very meaningful case where somebody's dog was killed and mutilated by a Yowie. In the Northern Territory, around Acacia Hills, there's been several reports. And in 1997, a mango farmer, Katrina Tucker, said she had seen one from just meters away on her own property. There were even photographs taken of large footprints that she said were left by the creature. In New South Wales, there have been reports of them in 1977, 1994, 1996, 2000, 2011, 12, and 13, where Yowies were said to be seen. So it seems that all over the place there have been people who have seen these. And Rex Gilroy, who is a cryptozoologist in Australia, claims to have collected over 3,000 reports of Yowie encounters, and he thinks they are absolutely some kind of relation of a sort to Bigfoot. So we've now had Bigfoots all over the place around the world. And it's interesting because the descriptions pretty much, by and large, are exactly the same with minor changes due to geography. So, for example, we've got white ones in snowy areas, grey ones in snowy areas, but the darker black, brown, or red-furred ones in the hotter areas where they would better blend in. So it's almost as if Bigfoot is absolutely a very real creature and may be understood in proper form just by the way that they vary as any animal would, dependent on their area. But next up is the Hawkesbury River Monster. And of course, water has always been somewhat mysterious around the world and to all the cultures. And apparently, in the depths of the Hawkesbury River, there is a creature which, according to legend, dates back thousands of years. It's supposed to be some kind of giant eel like creature, spotted many times and by many different people. It was described in myths over 3,000 years ago, can be found in rock art in the region, and is called by local people the Moolewonk. It's some kind of giant snake-like thing, but nevertheless has been seen by Europeans as well, much more recently in history. It's said to be of great size and grey with large serpent-like body or eel-like. It's sometimes described as having flippers, but this fits exactly to the Loch Ness monster type creatures which we often see, which may very well, in fact, be stories of prehistoric creatures that have stuck around. So maybe that is the case. Maybe it's something more. Now, the next interesting creature is Burrinjaw. Now, it's said that all dinosaurs died out after the asteroid hit the Earth, but what if not all of them did? And the Burrinjaw is an enormous reptile that's thought to be a dinosaur and a relative of the Tyrannosaurus rex. Now, in Australian folklore, the creature was named as Old Three Toes and has documented sightings from the 1950s even to the 1980s. It walks on two legs, operates at night, and has a diet of meat. It is carnivorous. It does seem to like livestock animals, which is not so convenient if you are a farmer, but I suppose an ancient dinosaur has to eat. Now, we know for absolute fact some of the largest reptiles in the world are indeed found in Australia, the great saltwater crocodiles. So why shouldn't there be a prehistoric creature also hanging around and doing suitable, terrifying things? Who's to say? We are nearly getting to the end, so remember it's your last chance to send lots and lots of likes, to comment, and send presents, because we like presents too, and I'm greedy. But do join our channel, join our fan club, and all the rest of it. And if you would like to go live, let me know. But as we go on, the next interesting creature, I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It seems that when they made up the name, they threw in some extra consonants just for the hell of it. But basically what this is a human-fish hybrid species that comes from Aboriginal mythology. And the physical description of these creatures, sometimes they sound more like mermaid-type creatures, and in others they are more like a monstrous thing. But what is interesting is that we encounter these underwater peoples in many places around the world. And it seems that in this case, it might well be a species and not a lone creature. But of course, it might just be a story made up to stop children from going to the riverside after dark. The most famous legend, of course, tells how it once attacked a steamboat owned by European settlers. The captain reached for his boat when he saw two giant hands grasping the hull. The elders warned the captain not to shoot, or he would face the consequences, but the captain thought, bugger this, and grabbed his firearm and shot. Soon after the incident, the captain's body became covered in red blisters, and he died 6 months later. Why? We don't know. But apparently, if giant hands grab your boat, don't shoot at it. But there you have it. Those are the major cryptids of Australia. Now, we need to look further on what we have and what we need to say about them all. Certainly, we can say that there is a certain amount of mythology that is very, very clearly just that. Hey, Maketsi, welcome, welcome. Glad you could make it. I think that the creatures that are probably prehistoric animals that were remembered and turned into stories, absolutely they would fit to that style. There's a couple of the cryptids that I would say are probably there as moral stories or warning stories. But there are a couple like the Yowie that seem to turn up in exactly the same descriptions and such world over. So maybe there's something more to that. Now, when it comes to the ghosts, they absolutely do seem to have come out of what we can call the standard mold, as it were, died under tragic circumstances or violent circumstances for the most part, and are still angry about their deaths, especially those in the lunatic asylum. One or two of them are very sad, of course, that when the kids have died and such. So that absolutely counts as a suitably scary but tragic story. We have confirmed, of course, that lights and cold spots accompany hauntings without a doubt. And also, it's possible that they might be able to make you feel quite sick, which is very possible as well. How true that is, I am not entirely certain, but it seems to bear up by a lot of the stories. Um, Cold spots, I can attest from my own experience that they certainly do. I still think we need to have answers for the why of both the orbs and the cold spots. We haven't got that yet. We haven't gotten an answer on whether or not ghosts can pass through glass. That's something else that has turned up and I think is very interesting. It's a good question. Can they go through glass? Because at least in Kenya they say they can't. And there may be a number of other small bits of evidence from other places that indicate this might be the case. Why would it be? I don't know, but nevertheless, we can say that along with the need for deep emotional events to make the ghosts appear, we can say that not all people do become ghosts. That's absolutely true as well. No doubt that matters. Um, we can see that hauntings vary in certain respects, but there are a number of tropes or types. The white lady turns up in quite a few cultures, and there are versions of her in Australia as well. Um, we've got your hitchhikers, people trying to go home even after death. So a number of those have turned up. And it seems that we have a number that still work where they died and are working till today. We find again that there are levels to the ghosts. Some are benign, some are not. Some are playful. Um, some want you dead too for some reason. But, excuse me, the most interesting one of all that we have encountered thus far is the fact that they have a ghost or spirit of some kind, which appears not only to be interested in scaring or hunting people, but in fact also frightens other ghosts. And that's something I'd like to know a lot more about. Can ghosts scare ghosts? Are there ghosts out there that are terrifying? I really don't know. I think that's a very interesting point, and I will certainly be looking out for more stories to advance that. Now, the last thing of all is the category number 3, which is what we have taken to referring to as the jinn. And the reason we call that is because the most info we had on these things came from Saudi Arabia, and they say that it is in fact a jinn, and for want of a better name. Now, these are creatures which seem to not entirely be ghosts at all, but they are not physical cryptids for most of the time. They are generally shadow creatures, often with glowing red eyes, and they seem to be able to slip between states of being or possibly dimensions, so that sometimes they cannot be seen at all, they're somewhere else entirely. Sometimes they can be seen but not touched, and are known to inhabit more desolate places. But there are occasions, excuse me, where these creatures are said to be able to become physical. Uh, and they can touch you, but you can also touch them. Um, and these shadow creatures have turned up now in Australia, but also in South Korea, in Canada, North America, South America, Wales, Portugal, um, where else have we been? A couple of places, South Africa, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire. Um, so quite a few places around the world described much the same and with very much the same attributes in terms of behavior. Sometimes they ignore you and don't care about you. Sometimes they seem to be um, almost interested in you, and sometimes they are quite aggressive. So perhaps that is something that is there. There are more stories in a number of these places, these haunted and notably abandoned places, where these shadow creatures are seen as well, some of them being quite aggressive and some of them not. So, is there another race that only partly lives on this plane of existence? Well, excuse me. I don't know why I'm getting an attack of the yawns. Um, Certainly, the best descriptions of it we have received thus far come, in fact, from um, Muslim stories and explanations, which is why they have ended up with the name of jinn. But many cultures that are and have not had any connection to Islam at all very much also speak of them. So it's not something that is purely from one area or one religion by any means at all. They've been seen worldwide. So we've now got a couple of so called cryptids um, that seem to hold a basis in many cultures. Your dinosaur type creatures is one. Um, you see, I do need more coffee. So, yeah, your dinosaur like creatures, your Bigfoot like creatures, the jinn, and absolutely all manner of ghosts, which fit very strongly to um, just about every single culture that there is. Interestingly, though, not every culture has tales of shapeshifters or of vampires. So perhaps you only get those creatures in particular areas, or maybe in some of those areas they're better at hiding. I don't know. But nevertheless, many countries do have uh, animal shifters. I don't want to call them werewolves or lycanthropes because obviously they are not always wolves at all. Many, in fact, can be other creatures, so we shall refer to them as therianthropes. Um, we did encounter a kind of a vampire creature in Australia, but very, very, very different from the normal depiction of what people think a a vampire is around the rest of the world. So I'm going to call it a knot on this one and say that there are no real vampires in Australia, which may make it a great place to visit. I don't know. We shall find out um, as we go around the world. But what do you think? Um, do you think that there is anything to any of this at all? Absolutely, we can say that many of the stories in Australia have a basis in the Aboriginal mythologies and things. Obviously, they've been there for much longer than anybody else. So we have that as a go. Um, I think the bunyip, if it ever was anything, would have been a prehistoric creature of some kind that may or may not still exist. It's always said to be hairy and carnivorous, but there are plenty of hairy and carnivorous things that swim, and it's never seemed to be something that swims in the ocean. It seems to be a freshwater creature. So there is that. Also, a number of times over history, there are tales of even finding actual deceased bunyips. So 1818, a carcass of one was apparently found. How true that is, we don't know. So there is that to consider. We can absolutely say, though, that many of the other creatures, they kind of fit to more moral stories than anything else. The closest we come to a werewolf type creature, though, is the Kinziger, which seems not to do too much in terms of shifting, or maybe it just was never seen to shift, which is a hybrid of a creature called a quoll. I have absolutely no clue what a quoll is, and a human, but apparently a quoll is a fanged predator. And when you get it in this particular form, it is a predator that predates on humans. It finds its victims in order to eat their flesh and drink their blood. So they do have a kind of therianthrope, but it doesn't say whether or not it actually is able to shapeshift. We do know that it is tool using, and it has some kind of a tail and a somewhat dog-like head in a way. So we have that. More than that, there aren't too many other creatures that really and truly are worthy of note that are said to exist. There are a number of dinosaurs that were said to be somewhat particular or unique to Australia that were pretty cool. But maybe some of the stories are memories of those. More than that, we do have the Blue Mountain Panther, which could very much exist or be extinct by now. But they say there is a certain kind of large cat out there, but it has not been proved. But that doesn't mean anything. There's been plenty of things that haven't been proved. But the Blue Mountain Panther is a panther-like cat, very normal, not supernatural, so that could exist. They do say that there is a nocturnal creature that should be avoided, which tries to hide from people, and that's the Malingi. But nobody really seems to know what it is or where it might be. What do you get from Australia? Well, hard to say. Mostly what you get is a huge amount of ghosts, which I think is fairly reasonable under the circumstances. A couple of quite unique cryptids, which is also fair enough, I think. And some pretty good reasons if you want to see something scary. It looks like the place to go is New South Wales, where they've got some really good stuff, and to a couple of the lunatic asylums, which apparently are sufficiently creepy no matter what. And that's where we've got to so far in terms of all of our cryptids and more. Now, I'm going to briefly ask you any opinions? Anybody think that there is more out there? Do you think that ghosts are no more than superstitious people and that Bigfoot is nothing more than a silly story? Or do you think there's something more to it? Should we be afraid? And indeed, what should we do about it? Well, hard to say. I didn't turn up anything particular that gave me any good answers as to what to do about ghosts or more that comes from Australia particularly. So no answers there. Maybe the Aboriginal tribes have their secrets and are keeping them, and I dare say that would be quite reasonable in that regard as well. Sometimes you need to keep a secret or two. But there you have it. That is the beginning of the supernatural and paranormal of Australia. Of course, there are plenty more stories and more personal stories that obviously we can't tell them all. And we've been going at this for 2 hours as it is, so I have run out of topic, I'm afraid. But we will be back again tomorrow. And we will have a new country and a new culture. I don't know if there's one that anyone particularly would feel they would like done. You would be more than welcome to request, and if we have not done it, we will give it a bash. Send me a message. That would be great. Remember, like, subscribe, join in, join the fan club, and share the lives with many, many people. We start our lives at the South African time of 10 o'clock. That's GMT plus 2. Because that's where I am and that's when I do it. And you would be more than welcome to join, though we do ask, as I have said, to at least be polite and respectful. Otherwise, I will unfortunately have to put the boot in. We've had one or two people be rude for no reason whatsoever, and we're supposed to do this to enjoy it rather than anything else, not because we want to be nasty to anyone. But to those of you who have stuck around throughout, I give you my greatest of thanks. It's been a fantastic one. I must say, I have very much enjoyed Australia, and I think that there is so much more we can do as well. So until then, I'm going to bid you good night and the best of sleeps. Sleep sweet and sleep deep, but sleep with one eye open, and maybe keep a suitable holy object nearby just in case, because you never know. Perhaps those things that go bump in the night might very well bump for you.